What if I told you that the greatest monuments in human history, the pyramids of Egypt, were not just tombs for kings, but coded messages carved in stone, secrets meant to survive the rise and fall of entire civilizations? Imagine standing before a mountain of limestone blocks, each one weighing more than a family car, stacked with a precision modern engineers still marvel at. But here's the question that has haunted archaeologists, historians, and dreamers alike for centuries. How did they do it, and why? Was it the will of godlike rulers who commanded thousands into endless labor, or something far more mysterious, a story buried beneath the desert sands, waiting to be unearthed? The pharaohs, revered as living gods, feared as rulers of life and death-held powers that could reshape the destiny of a nation. But behind their golden crowns and eternal resting places lies a tale of ambition, sacrifice, and unimaginable human effort. Some say these pyramids whisper of blood and betrayal. Others claim they hold celestial secrets pointing to the stars. Stay with us as we unlock the untold story of Egypt's pharaohs and their role in building the Great Pyramids. The journey begins now. Don't look away. The deserts whisper. The desert is silent now, broken only by the wind carrying fine grains of sand across the timeless plateau of Giza. Yet thousands of years ago, this silence was shattered by the pounding of hammers, the groan of wooden sledges, and the shouts of overseers echoing across the scorching landscape. It was here, beneath the relentless Egyptian sun, that a vision beyond imagination took form, one that would defy death itself. The pharaohs were not mere rulers. They were believed to be the sons of the gods, divine beings walking among mortals. Their word was law, their breath was destiny, and their lives were tied to eternity itself. But eternity is a fragile thing. Death stalks even kings, and the pharaohs knew it. That is why, in the heart of Egypt's old kingdom, they set their gaze upon the heavens and commanded the impossible, the building of monuments that would outlast flesh, outlast kingdoms, outlast even the desert sands. But let us pause here. Before we witness the raising of the Great Pyramid, before we step into the chambers where air has not stirred for millennia, we must ask, what drove these rulers to such madness? Was it vanity, the desperate hunger for immortality, or something deeper in ancient knowledge passed down through priesthoods and hidden texts, whispering that stone could defy time where flesh could not? The story begins with Pharaoh Sneferu, the innovator, the dreamer. He inherited a kingdom stable, rich, and eager for greatness. Unlike his predecessors, who buried themselves in modest, Mastaba's flat-roofed tombs that blended into the earth's Sneferu envisioned something greater. A structure that would pierce the heavens, a stairway for the soul to climb into the afterlife. His first attempts were bold, but flawed. The bent pyramid at Djoser, with its sudden change of angle midway up, still looms as a monument to human error. Too steep, the limestone cracked, threatening collapse, forcing architects to adjust. The result was both magnificent and imperfect, a warning carved into stone. Did Sneferu despair? No, he commanded yet another pyramid, the Red Pyramid, its angles corrected, its body rising in clean, majestic lines. Here, the idea took shape, a perfect pyramid, geometry incarnate, uniting earth and sky. For the first time, the pharaoh had proven that man could build not just for a lifetime, but for eternity. But it was Sneferu's son, Khufu, who would take this vision to a height no mortal had dared before. Khufu was no gentle ruler. History remembers him as a pharaoh both feared and ruthless, a king who demanded obedience not just from men, but from nature itself. When he looked upon the plateau of Giza, he saw more than desert. He saw the foundation of immortality. He ordered the construction of what would become the Great Pyramid, a mountain of stone that would consume decades, lives, and legends. Pause and imagine this. 2.5 million blocks of limestone and granite, some weighing as much as 80 tons, carved, transported, and lifted without machines, without steel, without wheels. Tens of thousands of workers, were they slaves, as ancient rumors suggest, or skilled laborers loyal to their god-king? The truth is more complicated and more human. Archaeological evidence whispers of vast worker villages near Giza, where bakers churned out loaves by the thousands, where butchers slaughtered cattle daily to feed the labor force. and where families lived and died in the shadow of rising stone. This was not the toil of shackled slaves alone, but the orchestrated effort of an entire kingdom. Men labored not just for Khufu, but for Mat, the divine order that governed the universe. To build for the pharaoh was to build for eternity, to secure one's place in the afterlife. But here lies the mystery. Why such precision? The base of the Great Pyramid is aligned almost perfectly with the cardinal points of the compass. Its sides rise at an angle that encodes mathematical knowledge far ahead of its time. The very dimensions seem to whisper cosmic secrets: the circumference of the earth, the distance to the sun, the golden ratio, all hidden in stone. Could Khufu's architects have known these things? Or is it coincidence, the human tendency to find patterns in chaos? Night after night, priests and astronomers gazed at the stars, charting their eternal movements. To the Egyptians, the heavens were not distant lights, but a map of the afterlife. The belt of Orion was linked to Osiris, god of the dead, and the pyramids at Giza, Khufu's, Khafre's, and Menkaure's stand aligned in uncanny resemblance to those stars. Was this mere chance, or did the pharaohs seek to anchor their souls among the gods themselves? And yet, for all their grandeur, the pyramids were not built without cost. Whispers of rebellion linger in the air, stories of lives crushed under stone, of men collapsing from exhaustion, of overseers wielding whips in power with merciless hands. Did Khufu hear their cries, or did he dismiss them as the necessary toll of eternity? The records remain silent, but the stones remembered. When the Great Pyramid finally rose complete, it stood taller than any structure on earth had ever dared. A beacon to the heavens, a monument to power, and a challenge to time itself. The pharaoh had become more than a man, he had become eternal. Or so he believed, but even in Khufu's triumph lay shadows. For what man builds, time seeks to unmake. Sand and wind erode. Kingdoms rise and fall. And even the pharaohs in their gilded tombs could not escape the silence of death. Yet here their monuments still stand, long after their names faded from living lips. The pyramids are more than stone. They are questions carved in silence. Who were the pharaohs who dared to command the impossible? How did they marshal the knowledge, the will, and the people to raise mountains in the desert? And most of all, why did they pour such unimaginable effort into monuments of death, while life itself was fleeting? As we step deeper into this story, we will peel back the layers of sand and time. We will meet not just kings, but the workers, priests, and dreamers who built alongside them. We will uncover conspiracies of succession, whispers of betrayal, and the blood price of eternity. For the tale of the pharaohs and their pyramids is not just about stone, it is about power, faith, and the desperate human struggle against oblivion. And so the journey begins, with Sneferu's failures and Khufu's triumph. But this is only the foundation. The story of the pharaohs does not end at Giza. There are more pyramids, more kings, more secrets waiting in the desert's endless silence. And with each layer of stone, the truth grows stranger, darker, more profound. Kings of stone and shadow, the Great Pyramid was finished, and the desert fell silent again, but only for a moment. For though Khufu's monument dwarfed all that came before, it also cast a long shadow, one his successors could not ignore. To follow such greatness was not merely a matter of ruling a kingdom. It was a contest against time, against legacy, against death itself. And into this contest stepped his son, Pharaoh Khafre. Khafre was a man born into the weight of expectation. Imagine being the heir to a monument that touched the sky, a tomb so vast and perfect that even the gods themselves might glance down in envy. How does one live in that shadow? How does one prove his own divinity when the desert already cradles eternity? Khafre's answer was simple: to rival his father, to carve his own eternity in stone. On the Giza plateau, the construction began again. Khafre's pyramid, though slightly smaller in scale than Khufu's, was cunning in its design. Built upon higher ground, it created the illusion of equal, perhaps even greater height. It gleamed with polished limestone casing, reflecting the sun like a beacon. From miles away, its brilliance could be seen blazing across the desert horizon, a mirror of Ra, the sun god himself. But Khafre's true act of defiance was not the pyramid alone, it was the guardian he placed before it, rising from the bedrock, sculpted with the body of a lion and the face of a man. The Great Sphinx was born. Its silent gaze has endured for more than 4,000 years, staring east toward the rising sun, as though watching eternity itself dawn each morning. Was it Khafre's face that adorned this colossal guardian? Many believe so, though others whisper of older kings, forgotten dynasties, and mysteries buried deeper than any tomb. Some say the Sphinx predates even the pyramids, a relic of an age lost to history, adopted by Khafre to guard his eternal home. But here lies the power of the pharaoh. Even uncertainty bends to his will. For as long as men believe the Sphinx belongs to Khafre, his shadow lingers eternal. Yet behind the grandeur of limestone and lion's eyes, the truth was darker. Khafre's reign was marked by a tightening grip. His father, Khufu, had ruled with iron, and Khafre inherited not just his crown, but his suspicion. Workers who once labored with loyalty now began to feel the weight of endless toil. The villages at Giza grew, and so did the strain. Bread and beer were rationed, bodies weakened under the desert sun, and whispers of unrest stirred among the labor force. Still, the pharaoh's command was absolute. To serve was not merely to live, but to earn salvation. Priests told the workers that their sweat mingled with sacred purpose. Each block lifted was a prayer. Each cut of stone was a step toward the eternal order of Mat. And so they labored on, caught between faith and survival, trapped in the eternal machinery of divine kingship, when Khafre's pyramid rose complete, and the Sphinx watched over its master's tomb. The plateau of Giza had become more than a necropolis, it had become a map of the heavens, etched into the earth. Khufu, Khafre, and those who would follow aligned their tombs, not just with the desert, but with the stars. The pharaohs were not content to rule the Nile. They sought dominion over eternity itself, but legacies are fragile things. After Khafre, his successor Menkaure chose a different path. Standing in the shadow of two colossal pyramids, Menkaure might have sought to rival them, but he did not. Instead, he built smaller, his pyramid rising only a fraction of the height of Khufu's and Khafre's. Why? Some say resources waned. The kingdom's wealth strained under the weight of eternal monuments. Others whisper that Menkaure was gentler than his predecessors, less consumed by ambition. He did not drive his workers to the same extremes. His reign was marked with more mercy, more humanity. Perhaps his pyramid's modest size was not weakness, but wisdom, a recognition that eternity was not measured in stone alone. Yet even in mercy, death comes suddenly. Menkaure's reign ended abruptly, and his pyramid was left unfinished. It was his queen Khufu who oversaw its completion, ensuring her husband's eternity even as her own life became legend. Some stories claim she ruled as pharaoh herself for a brief time, one of the few women to seize such power. Her tomb, near Menkaure's, stands as silent testimony to her will, but behind Menkaure's modest pyramid, the sands of time were shifting. The old kingdom, once radiant in its stability, began to show cracks. Resources drained, faith wavered. The people began to question whether these mountains of stone truly served their gods or merely the vanity of kings. The pyramids still gleamed beneath the sun, but shadows grew long across the desert, and yet the pharaohs pressed on. For them, to build was not a choice but a command of the divine. To abandon the pyramid was to abandon eternity, to let death claim not just the body, but the soul. Each ruler inherited both the glory and the burden of those who came before. To falter was to let the desert reclaim the legacy of Egypt. To pause here for a moment. Look upon Giza as it stood in Menkaure's day, 3 great pyramids aligned like Orion's belt, guarded by the lion-faced Sphinx, surrounded by temples, villages, and the hum of life and death intertwined. Could they have known that their work would endure thousands of years? Or did they believe in their hearts that even stone might one day crumble, leaving only the gods to remember? This is the paradox of the pharaohs. They built for eternity, yet they ruled in the moment, flesh and blood, vulnerable to time, to hunger, to betrayal. As the pyramids rose, so too did rivalries within the royal court, whispers of plots, and the ever-present threat of collapse. The kings of stone were also kings of shadow, their greatness balanced on the edge of fragility. The story of the pyramids is not just a tale of monuments, but of ambition's cost. Khufu's ruthlessness, Khafre's defiance, Menkaure's mercy each left its mark not just in stone, but in the lives of those who carried the blocks, baked the bread, spilled their blood beneath the desert sun. Eternity, it seems, was not free. It was bought with the sweat and sacrifice of thousands who will never have their names carved in history, yet whose hands shaped eternity itself. As the old kingdom reached its height, the pyramids stood as eternal guardians. But already the seeds of decline had been sown. Famine, political unrest, and the ever-present weight of divine ambition would soon test Egypt in ways no pharaoh could command away. The sands of Giza still whisper their story. Khufu, Khafre, Menkaure, three kings bound in stone, yet divided by ambition, by style, by fate. But their pyramids endure, even as empires crumble. And beyond them the desert waits, ready to swallow all. The blood beneath the stone. When we gaze at the pyramids today, we see only the triumph of stone, the perfection of geometry, the silence of eternity. But beneath the smooth limestone, once gleaming in the desert sun, lay a story far less serene, a story written not by kings, but by the hands of those who bent beneath the weight of each block. To tell the tale of the pharaohs is to tell the tale of their people, for the pyramids were not conjured by divine decree alone. They were carved from the sweat, the blood, and the fragile faith of thousands who labored in their shadows. The worker villages near Giza, discovered by archaeologists, speak volumes. These were no prisons of chained slaves, as ancient Greek writers once imagined, but bustling towns where bakers fed entire armies of builders, where brewers brewed thick beer to quench thirst and give strength, where families lived, loved, and buried their dead. Yet to call them free would be a deception. They were bound not by chains of iron, but by chains of duty. To build for the pharaoh was to serve the gods, to uphold the sacred balance of the universe. Refusal was unthinkable. And so, willingly or not, they toiled day after day. Men dragged sledges across ramps slicked with water to ease the stone's passage. Teams heaved in unison, their muscles straining as overseers shouted commands above the roar of labor. The desert heat scorched their skin, sand scoured their eyes, and still they pulled. Bones fractured, backs broke, lives ended in silence. When one fell, another stepped forward, for the pharaoh's vision did not pause for grief. And yet, amid the hardship, there was pride. Imagine the son of a farmer, his hands more used to pulling nets from the Nile than hauling stone, standing one evening at the base of the rising pyramid. He looks upward and sees the sun setting behind a mountain that he himself helped lift. It is not just the pharaoh's monument, it is his. His sweat glistens on the stone, his breath lingers in the cracks. Eternity, for once, seems close enough to touch, but not all found solace in faith. Whispers of resentment grew, carried like dust in the wind. Why do we build for him while our own children go hungry? Some muttered. Why must we raise his soul to the heavens while ours rot in the earth? Such thoughts were dangerous, for to question the pharaoh was to question the gods. Yet hunger breeds defiance, and in the shadows of the villages, unrest smoldered like embers waiting for a spark. At the heart of this delicate balance stood the priests. Dressed in white linen, heads shaved, their words carried a weight even kings feared. They were the keepers of the mysteries, the interpreters of the God's will, the guardians of secrets written on papyrus and carved into temple walls. No stone was laid without their blessing, no chamber sealed without their rituals. If the pharaoh was the flesh of the gods, the priests were their voice, and in their silence lay a power as vast as the pyramids themselves. Behind closed doors, in torchlit halls thick with incense, the priests debated the alignments of the pyramids. The stars, they said, must be consulted. The rising of Sirius, herald of the Nile's floods, must guide the calendar. The constellations of Orion and the circumpolar stars, the imperishables that never set, must be etched into stone, so the pharaoh's soul might rise among them forever. Was it knowledge or manipulation? Did the priests truly chart the heavens, or did they wield mystery as a tool to keep pharaohs under their sway? Consider this: the Great Pyramid's shafts, narrow tunnels piercing its core, the line with the belt of Orion and the North Star. Was this mere coincidence? Or the priests' deliberate design ensuring Khufu's soul would ascend among the gods? To the workers it mattered little. They knew only that their toil carried divine weight. But to the priests it was a chessboard of power, each block another move in a game that spanned not years but eternities. Still, the strain on the kingdom grew. Building mountains of stone drained more than sweat. It devoured wealth, resources, and patience. Grain had to be taxed, labor conscripted, the Nile's bounty diverted to feed workers instead of villages. And when the Nile faltered, as it sometimes did, famine crept in like a thief in the night. The people, once loyal, began to murmur, "Why do we starve while the pharaoh feasts in marble halls? Why do we bury gold with the dead while the living have none?" It is here that the true cracks appeared, not in the pyramids themselves, but in the kingdom they were meant to preserve. Pharaohs had always claimed divinity, but divinity requires belief. And belief is fragile, especially when bellies are empty. The pyramids, once beacons of faith, began to look like monuments of arrogance. The pharaohs had promised eternity, but what of today? What of the mothers who buried children while the king's tomb rose ever higher? The priests, sensing the shifting winds, tightened their grip. They whispered of curses for those who defied the king, of wrath from the gods if mat was broken. They reminded the people that without Pharaoh, chaos would reign. But whispers of faith could not always silence the growl of hunger. The old kingdom had reached its zenith. The pyramids of Khufu, Khafre, and Menkaure stood aligned with the stars, guardians of the dead. But beneath them, the living grew restless. Rebellion simmered. Provinces began to pull away from the center, their governors gaining power as the pharaoh's grip loosened. What was once a united kingdom under god-kings began to fracture, piece by piece. And so the irony emerges: the very monuments built to ensure eternity may have hastened decline. The pharaohs poured their wealth, their resources, their faith into stone, but stone could not feed the hungry or silence dissent. As the last great pyramid rose, the old kingdom trembled. Pause, then, and picture this moment: the pyramids gleaming under the sun, still fresh, their casing stones smooth, their angles sharp. The Sphinx watching silently, the temples alive with ritual, the workers' villages humming with life. To any outsider, Egypt seemed eternal. Yet beneath that polished surface, cracks spread like invisible fractures in stone, waiting for time to reveal them. The pharaohs had built for the afterlife. But in doing so, they risked the life of the kingdom itself. The desert remembers. The pyramids endure. But even eternity has a cost, and Egypt was about to pay it. The fall of gods. The pyramids stood gleaming in the desert sun, their limestone casing reflecting brilliance across the Nile Valley. But behind their radiance, the kingdom was unraveling. The old kingdom, the age of the pyramids, was nearing its twilight. The pharaohs had built mountains to defy time, yet time, relentless and merciless, was already eroding their power. The signs began quietly as whispers in the villages. The Nile, lifeblood of Egypt, failed to flood as it once had. Its waters receded, its fertile silt diminished, and with it the harvests withered. Famine came creeping into homes like a silent predator. Parents stared into the hollow eyes of starving children while granaries once bursting with abundance now echoed empty. But still, the temples demanded offerings. Still, the pharaoh demanded labor. Still, the pyramids rose. What good were mountains of stone, the people asked, when the land itself no longer answered the gods? Had Pharaoh lost favor with the divine? Or was the pharaoh himself no longer divine? It was a dangerous thought, but hunger breeds courage or desperation. The belief that bound the people to their rulers, the sacred trust that Pharaoh was both king and god, began to fracture. For centuries, the pyramids had embodied the pharaoh's promise that his rule upheld Mat, the cosmic order, and that his death ensured the land's harmony. But with famine and unrest spreading, the pyramids began to look like cruel monuments, shimmering symbols of a promise broken. Each gleaming block reminded the starving that their lives had been poured into eternity while their present crumbled into dust. Provincial governors, once mere stewards of Pharaoh's will, began to seize power for themselves. They hoarded grain, levied their own taxes, commanded their own soldiers. Their loyalty to the throne wavered, for what was a pharaoh who could not feed his people? Egypt, once united beneath the shadow of Giza, began to fracture into a patchwork of rival powers. This was the first intermediate period, a time of chaos, famine, and political disintegration. The Great Pyramids still stood, silent and unmoved, but the divine kings who built them were powerless. The desert winds howled across abandoned temples. Tombs were looted, pyramids desecrated. Even the sacred chambers, once thought inviolable, were broken into by desperate hands searching for treasure. The gods had promised eternity, but men were hungry, and eternity could wait. Yet even in chaos, ambition does not die. Pharaohs still rose, claiming the crowns of Upper and Lower Egypt, desperate to reclaim the glory of their ancestors. Some sought to imitate the pyramids, but their efforts revealed more weakness than strength. At Abydos, the rulers of the 9th and 10th dynasties clung to scraps of authority, their monuments far humbler than those of Giza. At Hera, kings attempted to establish new centers of power, but their pyramids were smaller, their walls weaker, their names less enduring. Without the wealth of a united Egypt, they could not command mountains of stone. Their pyramids crumbled, unfinished or poorly built, a stark contrast to the grandeur of Khufu and Khafre. But in Thebes, far to the south, a new dynasty rose with fire in their veins. They saw themselves as heirs not only to the throne but to the legacy of the pyramid builders. They fought their rivals with steel and blood, slowly reuniting Egypt under their rule. This was the birth of the Middle Kingdom, an age that sought to restore balance, to reclaim Mat, to remind Egypt of her greatness. The pharaohs of the Middle Kingdom turned again to the pyramid as a symbol of power, but something had changed. Their pyramids, built of mud-brick cores with limestone facades, lacked the permanence of Giza. Time, rain, and wind reduced many of them to little more than mounds of rubble. The ambition was still there, but the solidity of eternity was gone. The pyramids of Senusret II and Amenhotep III rose in imitation of Khufu's glory, but they could not rival the sheer strength of stone blocks hauled by Old Kingdom armies of laborers. And yet, there was innovation. Deep within these new pyramids, the burial chambers became labyrinths of traps and deception. Secret passages, false doors, and hidden chambers were carved to confuse tomb robbers. For by now, even eternity required protection from the living. The pharaohs still sought to rise among the stars, but they no longer trusted stone alone. They relied on secrecy, trickery, and the whispered power of their priests. But here is the great irony. The more the pharaohs tried to protect their eternity, the more fragile it became. Their pyramids crumbled faster, their treasures looted sooner, their reigns remembered less. The monuments that had once shouted of divine power now whispered of vulnerability. The gods of the Old Kingdom had seemed eternal, but in the Middle Kingdom, eternity was already fading. Still, the priests whispered of the stars. Still, the rituals were performed. Still, the pharaohs demanded their place among the imperishable heavens. They aligned their tombs to Orion, to Sirius, to the North Star. They invoked Ra, Osiris, and Horus with prayers that echoed against stone. But the people, though loyal, were not blind. They had seen famine, they had seen weakness, they had seen the gods themselves falter. And though Egypt rose again, a seed of doubt had been planted. In this tension lies the heart of Egypt's story. The battle between the promise of eternity and the reality of mortality. The pharaohs built for the afterlife, but their kingdoms crumbled in the present. They poured treasure into stone, but their people bled in the dust. And yet, even after the collapse, they returned to the pyramid. Why? Because no other monument spoke so powerfully of the divine. No other structure bound earth and sky so completely. No other vision offered eternity carved into the bones of the desert. And so, the Middle Kingdom pharaohs built, even as their monuments failed them. For what choice did they have? To abandon the pyramid was to abandon their claim to divinity. To build was to fight against oblivion, even if the fight was already lost. Look now across the desert in this age. The Great Pyramid still towers, Khafre's guardian sphinx still stares, Menkaure's modest tomb still rests in their shadow. Around them, lesser pyramids crumble, the dreams of later kings reduced to ruin. The message is clear: eternity is not equal. Some pharaohs carved their names into the sky. Others sank into dust, their monuments forgotten, and yet the struggle continues. Each pharaoh who rose believed he could bend eternity to his will. Each believed he could surpass his predecessors, reclaim their glory, restore the order of the cosmos. And in their ambition lies the story of humanity itself, the desperate, unyielding refusal to accept that time will erase us, but time is patient. The pyramids endured, but Egypt would again falter. Another storm was gathering on the horizon, one that no monument could withstand. Betrayal, invasion, and the rise of foreign powers would soon test Egypt in ways that even the gods could not have foreseen. The pyramids remained, silent and unbroken. But the pharaohs who claimed them? Their voices were fading into the sands. The echo of eternity, the last echoes of hammer and chisel faded from the desert. No longer did thousands of men strain beneath the weight of limestone blocks. No longer did the pharaoh's voice command mountains to rise. The age of the Great Pyramids was over. The Old Kingdom had collapsed, the Middle Kingdom had faltered, and Egypt was learning a bitter truth: eternity could not be built forever. The New Kingdom pharaohs, rising centuries later, did not command pyramids. They looked to Giza and saw the fate of their ancestors. Though the pyramids still towered, they had been violated. Tomb robbers had tunneled into chambers once thought secure, treasures meant for the gods stolen by mortal hands. The pharaohs learned that stone alone could not guard the afterlife, and so they turned away from the plateau of Giza, away from monuments that shouted their names across the desert, and sought instead the silence of the cliffs dot in the Valley of the Kings. Hidden tombs were carved into the rock. Concealed beneath the earth, their entrances disguised, their passages twisting like serpents, these tombs were designed not to dazzle the living but to protect the dead. Pharaohs like Thutmose, Ramses, and the boy king Tutankhamun chose secrecy over spectacle. They no longer raised mountains to pierce the sky, but dug labyrinths to vanish into the earth. Eternity had changed its shape, and yet the shadow of the pyramids never faded. The pharaohs of the New Kingdom invoked the glory of Khufu, Khafre, and Menkaure in their hymns, even as they chose different paths. They knew that no monument, however concealed, would ever rival the majesty of Giza. The pyramids had become not merely tombs, but symbols, the eternal reminder of an age when kings were gods and men moved mountains, but the world beyond Egypt was changing. Foreigners came and went: Hyksos invaders, Nubian kings, Libyan rulers, Persian conquerors, and finally Alexander the Great. Each gazed upon the pyramids in awe. Greek historians wrote of them with wonder and exaggeration. Herodotus, the father of history, claimed they were built by countless slaves, their lives consumed for the vanity of kings. It was a tale that endured, though modern evidence suggests a different story, of workers fed, housed, and honored. Even if they bore the crushing weight of labor, the Romans came next. And even they, masters of stone and empire, stood humbled before the pyramids. They stripped their casing stones, repurposed temples, yet they could not erase the awe. For the pyramids were too vast, too silent, too eternal. They defied time, even as kingdoms fell. But what of the pharaohs themselves? Their names, once carved deep into stone, were often lost. Their treasures plundered, their mummies desecrated, their power forgotten. Only a handful, Khufu, Khafre, Menkaure, remained remembered, tethered to their eternal homes. The rest sank into the sands of history. And here lies the cruel paradox. The pyramids endured, but the men who built them were swallowed by time. Eternity, it seems, belongs more to the stones than to the kings, and yet the pyramids still whisper. Their alignment with the stars continues to stir debate. Did the pharaohs truly possess hidden knowledge of the cosmos? Were the shafts of Khufu's pyramid deliberately aligned to Orion's belt, guiding the king's soul to Osiris? Or do we, in our hunger for mystery, find patterns where none were meant? Each age has asked these questions anew. In the Middle Ages, travelers believed the pyramids were granaries built by Joseph of the Bible. In the Renaissance, scholars speculated on secret codes hidden in their measurements. In the modern age, theories of lost civilizations, extraterrestrials, and hidden chambers fill books and screens. The pyramids remain as they always were, enigmas in stone, but perhaps the true mystery is not how they were built, but why they endure. Why, after 4,000 years, do they still captivate us? Why do we stand before them, awed and humbled, as though in the presence of gods? The answer lies not in their size or their shape, but in what they represent, the eternal human struggle against time. The pharaohs built pyramids to defy death, to claim immortality. And in a way, they succeeded. For though their names fade, their monuments speak still, stand at the foot of Khufu's Great Pyramid today, and you feel it, the weight of history pressing down, the silence of thousands of years humming in the stone. Each block whispers of the hands that raised it, the sweat that stained it, the dreams that shaped it. Each angle points to the sky, a reminder that humanity has always reached for eternity. The pharaohs are gone. Their kingdoms are dust. But their pyramids remain, eternal witnesses to the audacity of human ambition. They are not just tombs. They are questions carved in limestone, riddles the desert has yet to answer. Were they monuments of faith, of tyranny, of genius, or of desperation? Perhaps they were all of these at once. And so the story closes, not with an ending, but with a silence. The pharaohs sought eternity in stone, and in stone they remain. The pyramids rise from the desert like frozen flames, eternal yet elusive, daring us to understand them. They remind us of what it means to be human, to dream in a dream beyond our lives, to fight against the dark, to carve our names into time itself. The sun sets over Giza, casting long shadows across the plateau. The Great Pyramid glows in the fading light, the Sphinx watches in silence, and the desert whispers its eternal question, what does it mean to live forever? The pharaohs answered with stone. The rest is left to us.